He arrived at the busy plaza with his small bag slung over his shoulder and a sense of excitement mixed with nerves in his chest. The day was warm, and the sun shone brightly on the people passing by. He had noticed the piano sitting in the open corner of the square earlier in the morning, a beautiful instrument left for public use. To him, it was more than just a piano. It was an opportunity to share something he had spent years perfecting. Every time he played, he felt alive, and today he wanted to share that feeling with anyone who would listen. Setting his bag down carefully on the pavement, he checked the piano once more. The keys were clean, the wood polished, and it looked inviting. His heart beat faster as he positioned himself in front of it, adjusting his posture. He could see people glancing his way, some curious, some indifferent. He took a deep breath, telling himself that no matter what happened, he would give this moment everything he had. Just as he lifted his hands to touch the keys, a tall security guard approached. The guard's expression was firm, his eyes scanning the surrounding area as if preparing to enforce rules that might not even be written down. "Excuse me," the guard said, his tone strict but not aggressive. "You can't play here." He looked up at the guard, trying to remain calm. "I'm just going to play for a few minutes," he said softly. "It's a public piano, and I only want to share my music." The guard shook his head, crossing his arms. "I don't care. You have to stop. It's not allowed." There was a tension in the air now, a small crowd beginning to notice the interaction. People paused in their tracks, sensing something unusual was about to happen. For a moment he hesitated, glancing at the crowd. Some faces were encouraging, nodding or smiling, while others seemed doubtful, whispering to companions about whether he should continue. His hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly, but his determination remained strong. He knew that the music he could create might speak louder than any words or arguments. "Please," he said, trying to make his voice calm and respectful. "I'm not causing any trouble. I just want to play for a few minutes. If anyone complains, I will stop immediately." The guard frowned, his stance unchanging. It was clear that rules were rules, but something in the young man's earnest expression seemed to make the guard pause. The young man took another deep breath, centering himself. He thought about all the hours he had spent practicing, the countless evenings alone with the piano, perfecting scales and songs that expressed everything he felt but couldn't always say. He reminded himself that music had a way of breaking down barriers and connecting people in ways nothing else could. He would not let fear stop him now. Slowly, he rested his fingers on the keys, feeling the cool surface beneath his touch. A hush fell over the immediate area. Passers-by who had stopped to watch sensed the importance of the moment. Even the security guard shifted slightly, his attention now on the young man's hands rather than the rules he had come to enforce. He began with a simple melody, soft and gentle, almost hesitant at first. The notes floated in the air, delicate and warm, catching the sunlight as it bounced across the plaza. People began to lean in, curious and intrigued. The music seemed to pull them closer, wrapping around their attention like a gentle invitation. Children paused mid-step, their eyes wide with wonder, and even the adults stopped speaking, captivated by the sound. As the melody grew, the young man's confidence increased. He allowed himself to feel the music fully, letting it flow through him with emotion and clarity. His fingers danced across the keys, each note carefully placed yet infused with natural expression. It was clear to anyone watching that this was not just a casual performance. This was someone sharing a piece of themselves in the most honest way possible. The guard watched silently now, the earlier tension softening as he realized that the music was not causing harm or disturbance. People around him began filming on their phones, quietly capturing the moment as if it were too special to forget. A small smile appeared on a few faces in the crowd, and whispers of admiration spread quietly among the onlookers. Time seemed to slow. The plaza, which moments ago had been filled with the ordinary sounds of footsteps, chatter, and distant traffic, was now dominated by the gentle, compelling music. Each note told a story of patience, dedication, and courage. People felt it in their hearts, even if they did not know the musician personally. For some, it brought back memories. For others, it sparked dreams of possibilities and hope. The young man's focus never wavered. He knew this could be a turning point, not just for himself, but for everyone watching. Music has a way of changing the mood of a room, of softening attitudes and bringing people together. He hoped that even the skeptical guard could feel that, even for a moment. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours to those watching. The melody had grown richer, more confident, as he allowed himself to express more of what he felt inside. Every pause, every subtle shift in tempo, added depth and emotion. It was clear to everyone that this performance was no ordinary moment. It was something that had been nurtured for years and was finally being shared in full view of the world. By now, the crowd had grown larger, with people stepping out of their way just to get a better view. Some had stopped filming to simply listen, recognizing that this experience was not just about recording, but about feeling. There was a collective sense of anticipation, a curiosity about where the music would lead next, and an unspoken respect for the courage it took to play in the face of opposition. The young man glanced briefly at the guard, who now seemed unsure of what to do. The sternness was still there, but it was tempered by fascination. The guard had clearly never seen anyone play with such skill and emotion in a public space before. He found himself rooting silently for the musician, caught between the rules and the undeniable beauty of what was unfolding. The young man's mind was entirely on the music, each note a message of persistence, hope, and self-expression. He felt a sense of liberation in defying the hesitation, in trusting that his talent and passion could speak louder than any doubt or disapproval. The plaza had transformed into a space of shared experience, a moment where strangers were connected by the universal language of music. As the first part of his performance came to an end, the final note lingered in the air, echoing softly and leaving the crowd in a brief, stunned silence. People looked at each other, almost unable to believe what they had just heard. The young man's eyes met those of the guard once more, and this time, there was no anger or frustration, only acknowledgement of the skill and courage it took to continue playing despite the challenge. For the young man, that silence was powerful. It meant he had succeeded in capturing attention, in touching hearts, and in making a difference in the lives of strangers for even just a few minutes. The music had spoken, and it had been heard, and he knew that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The plaza would remember him, the crowd would remember him, and perhaps the world beyond that plaza would remember him too. With a humble nod to the guard and a quick glance at the now fully attentive crowd, he prepared himself for the next part of his journey, the part where his music would truly come alive and start to spread beyond the plaza, reaching hearts far beyond what he could imagine. The challenge of the security guard, the nerves, the uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment, and he was ready to embrace what came next. As soon as the young man began to play again, the music changed, becoming richer and more expressive. He let himself feel every note, every chord, letting the piano become a part of him. His fingers moved smoothly across the keys, telling a story that words could never fully express. The crowd, which had been watching curiously before, was now completely captivated. People paused from their busy routines, some even forgetting why they had come to the plaza in the first place. The melody started gently, a soft tune that seemed to float in the air, wrapping the audience in a sense of calm. People felt as if they were listening to a conversation, one that spoke directly to their hearts. The notes rose and fell like the waves of an ocean, each one carrying emotion and life. Those who had walked past without noticing the piano before now stopped to listen, drawn in by the beauty of the sound. The young man's confidence grew with every passing second. His initial hesitation had vanished, replaced by a deep connection with the music. It was as if he and the piano were communicating without words, understanding each other perfectly. His eyes closed occasionally, and he let the rhythm guide him, expressing feelings he had held inside for years. The crowd could feel it too, sensing the raw passion behind every note. A few people in the crowd began recording videos on their phones, hoping to capture the moment. They whispered to each other about how incredible it was, amazed at the skill and emotion the young man displayed. The music seemed to speak to everyone differently, Some felt joy, some nostalgia, and some a sense of hope. Children sat cross-legged on the ground, mesmerized, while older listeners nodded with quiet appreciation. Even the security guard, who had been so strict before, seemed affected. He leaned against a post, watching silently as the young man's performance unfolded. His expression softened, and for a moment it was clear that he forgot all about rules and restrictions. The music had created a bridge between authority and art, showing that sometimes the heart's expression could surpass the need for control. The melody grew stronger, and the young man began to explore more complex patterns on the piano. He moved from gentle, flowing passages to faster, more dramatic sequences that made people's eyes widen in awe. The sound filled the plaza, echoing against buildings and walls, creating an atmosphere that was both intimate and grand. Passers-by stopped, drawn to the energy and emotion, and soon there was a large circle of people surrounding him. People started to clap softly, timing their applause with the rhythm of the music. Others smiled at strangers next to them, sharing an unspoken bond over the experience. It was as if the music had created a temporary community, where strangers could connect over a shared moment of beauty and inspiration. The young man noticed the reactions and allowed himself a small smile, though he remained focused on the piano. As the performance continued, he began to add subtle variations, improvising slightly to make the music feel alive and spontaneous. The crowd responded instantly, leaning in to catch every nuance, every change in tone. Each note seemed carefully chosen yet effortless, showing not only technical skill but also a deep understanding of emotion. The young man's ability to convey feelings through the piano made it clear that this was not a casual performance. It was a passionate sharing of his inner world. People began to whisper about how unusual it was to see someone play so beautifully in a public space. Many commented on the dedication it must have taken to reach this level of skill. Some even compared it to professional performances, astonished that such talent could appear in a random plaza. Their curiosity grew, and some who had been hesitant at first now found themselves completely immersed in the music. The young man noticed the small gestures of appreciation from the audience. Children tapping their feet, older listeners swaying gently, and even the guard nodding slightly in rhythm. These moments reminded him why he played music in the first place, and he felt a renewed energy flowing through him. He poured his heart into the piano, letting the sound tell a story that everyone could feel. Suddenly, the music took on a more playful tone. He added light, quick notes that danced across the keys, making the crowd chuckle and smile. People began to move slightly, clapping in rhythm and nodding along. The energy of the plaza shifted, becoming lively and joyous, all centered around the young man's talent. The music had transformed the space, turning a regular day into an unforgettable experience. The melody then softened again, moving into a more emotional and reflective section. He allowed pauses between notes, giving space for the audience to absorb the feelings. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others whispered to friends about how beautiful it was. The performance was more than just sound. It was an experience that connected hearts and emotions in a way few things could. As he reached the final part of the piece, the young man's hands moved confidently and gracefully across the keys. The music swelled, filling every corner of the plaza. People held their breath as the last notes lingered, echoing softly before fading into silence. For a moment, there was no movement, only awe and admiration. The plaza, once full of ordinary noise, was now filled with a sense of wonder and magic. When the crowd finally reacted, they erupted into applause, cheers, and whistles. Strangers clapped each other on the back, smiled widely, and shared expressions of amazement. The young man bowed slightly, acknowledging their appreciation but remaining humble. He had not played for recognition or praise, but seeing the impact of his music filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose. People continued to gather, some asking questions, others complimenting him on his incredible skill. Phones were still recording, ready to share the experience with the world. The energy of the crowd was contagious, spreading excitement and positivity throughout the plaza. Even the guard, who had initially tried to stop him, now seemed genuinely impressed and slightly proud to have witnessed such talent. The young man packed up his small bag but remained near the piano, letting people approach and talk to him. He shared a few words about his love for music, his practice, and his belief that anyone could find joy in playing or listening if they gave it a chance. His humility and sincerity made the interaction even more memorable, and many left feeling inspired and uplifted. As the day went on, more people came to see the piano, drawn by the word of mouth and the videos already circulating on phones. His performance had created a ripple effect, showing that genuine talent and passion could draw people together and create moments of shared happiness. The plaza was no longer just a busy place. It had become a stage for connection, emotion, and human experience, all sparked by one young man and his piano. He knew this was just the beginning. The music had reached hearts, and the story of this day would travel beyond the plaza. It would be shared online, talked about in neighborhoods, and remembered by everyone who had witnessed it. The young man felt a quiet pride, not in himself, but in the power of music to overcome obstacles, break tension, and bring joy to strangers. This was the true magic of his performance, and he was eager to see where it would lead next. The next day, the young man returned to the plaza, carrying only his small bag and a quiet sense of anticipation. The memory of yesterday's performance lingered in his mind, and he wondered if anyone would remember or if today would feel the same. As he approached the piano, he noticed a few familiar faces from the crowd that had gathered yesterday. Some waved, others nodded in recognition, and a few smiled as they whispered among themselves about the incredible performance they had witnessed. He set his bag down carefully and looked at the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys to get a feel for it. The surface was still smooth, and the air around it felt alive with possibility. He felt a mix of nervousness and excitement, knowing that music had the power to draw people in again, but also aware that expectations could be high after the previous day. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that playing was not about applause or recognition. It was about expression and connection. Almost immediately, people began to notice him setting up. Curious onlookers paused to watch, some stopping in their tracks, and others quietly finding a place to sit or stand. He could feel their eyes, not in a way that intimidated him, but as a gentle encouragement, a reminder that they were ready to listen. This time, the crowd was larger and more diverse, including people who had never seen him play before, and some who had come specifically to experience his music again. As he touched the keys, the first notes rang out clearly, filling the plaza with sound. This time, the melody was more intricate, more confident, showing a level of skill that made the audience take notice immediately. Children tilted their heads, listening closely, while adults exchanged surprised glances, impressed by the combination of talent and emotion. The music had a rhythm that was both familiar and captivating, drawing people together and making them pause their busy lives to enjoy something beautiful. The young man allowed himself to get lost in the music. He let his emotions guide the flow of the melody, moving from soft and gentle notes to faster, more energetic sequences. Every chord he played seemed intentional, full of meaning and life. The audience responded instinctively, some nodding along with the rhythm, others closing their eyes to feel the sound more deeply. A quiet sense of unity began to form among them, a shared experience created by music alone. As the performance progressed, more people gathered. Tourists, locals, and casual passers-by all stopped to listen. Phones were out, recording and streaming the performance for others to see. Whispers of amazement floated through the crowd, as everyone shared in the discovery of this unexpected talent. His performance was becoming more than just a personal expression. It was creating a communal moment, a memory for everyone present. The young man experimented with dynamics, shifting from delicate, whispering passages to bold, resonant sections that seemed to command attention without demanding it. He noticed the subtle reactions from the audience. A child clapping quietly in time with the melody, an elderly couple smiling at each other, friends nudging each other in surprise at how talented he was. The music was a conversation without words, connecting everyone in a way that felt natural and sincere. Even the security guard from yesterday appeared, leaning casually against a nearby post. He watched quietly, no longer insisting that the young man stop. Instead, he seemed intrigued, perhaps even protective, as if he had become a silent guardian of the performance. The guard's presence added a sense of familiarity and reassurance, letting the musician feel supported even in a public space. People began to move closer, forming a loose circle around him. Some were hesitant at first, unsure if they should stay, but the music drew them in, softening boundaries and inviting them to be part of the moment. Children pointed to the piano with excitement. Adults whispered about the talent they were witnessing, and strangers shared smiles and glances that spoke of appreciation and wonder. It was a scene of simple human connection, made possible by the young man's dedication and skill. He continued to play, transitioning seamlessly into a more emotional section. The notes became slower, filled with a sense of longing and reflection. People felt the shift immediately, sensing the story behind each chord. Some placed their hands over their hearts, others closed their eyes, letting memories and feelings surface. The young man was not just performing. He was telling a story, and the plaza had become a living audience to his narrative. With the music flowing, he added subtle improvisations, delicate flourishes that showcased both his creativity and mastery. The audience responded unconsciously, leaning in, shifting their attention, and holding their breath during pauses. Each variation seemed to speak directly to someone in the crowd, creating an intimate experience even in a public space. The magic of the moment was undeniable, and it felt as if time had slowed, allowing everyone to fully appreciate what was happening. As the melody built toward a climax, the young man's hands moved with increased confidence and energy. The notes echoed, resonating with power and emotion. People gasped softly, unable to hide their admiration. Some clapped along, others swayed gently, and a few whispered words of encouragement. The plaza, once filled with ordinary noises, was now transformed into a space of wonder and shared experience. When he reached the final chords, the notes lingered in the air, fading slowly and leaving a hush over the crowd. There was a moment of silence, a collective pause as everyone absorbed the performance. Then, as if a signal had been given, applause erupted. People cheered, clapped, and whistled, expressing their appreciation for the talent they had witnessed. The young man bowed slightly, acknowledging the crowd with humility and gratitude. After the performance, people approached him, eager to share their thoughts and appreciation. Some complimented his skill, others remarked on the emotion he had conveyed, and a few asked how long he had been practicing. He responded modestly, emphasizing that playing was about love for music rather than recognition. His sincerity only made the experience more impactful, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The day continued with more people arriving, some who had heard about the performance through social media or word of mouth. The young man played multiple pieces, each one drawing the audience deeper into the experience. The energy in the plaza was electric, yet peaceful, a balance of excitement and reverence for the music. Strangers connected over the shared experience, forming a temporary community of listeners, all brought together by the piano and the young man's talent. By the end of the day, it was clear that something special had happened. The young man had not only shared his music, but had created a moment of unity, inspiration, and joy. The crowd dispersed slowly, many carrying the memory with them, some sharing recordings online, and others simply reflecting quietly on what they had witnessed. Even the guard lingered for a while, silently acknowledging the extraordinary impact of the performance. As the young man packed up his bag and prepared to leave, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The music had reached hearts, changed moods, and connected strangers in ways that words alone could not. He knew this was only the beginning of a journey, one where his talent could continue to inspire, uplift, and bring people together. The plaza, once just a busy public space, had become a place of shared wonder, and he had been the catalyst. With a final glance at the piano, he walked away, carrying not just his bag, but the memory of a day where music had transformed a space, a community, and perhaps even himself. Word about the young man's piano performance spread quickly. By the next morning, Clips from his performances were already circulating online. Friends, strangers, and people who had witnessed him play were sharing the videos with captions full of awe and admiration. The message was clear. This was something extraordinary, something that could not be ignored. He woke up feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness, knowing that the world beyond the plaza was now watching. As he arrived at the plaza, he noticed people gathering even earlier than before. Some were familiar faces from the previous days, while others had traveled from nearby neighborhoods just to see him play. He carried his bag, the small case that contained nothing more than his essentials and a sense of purpose. The piano sat waiting in the corner, as inviting as ever, and he approached it with calm determination. When he started playing, the familiar notes floated into the air, instantly recognizable to those who had already seen him perform. The melody was warm and welcoming, gently drawing people closer. Children smiled, adults leaned in, and even people passing by with little interest in music found themselves stopping to listen. It was a rare moment where the ordinary routines of life were paused, replaced by curiosity and wonder. The young man allowed himself to become completely absorbed in the music. Each chord, each transition, was deliberate yet natural, carrying with it the depth of emotion he had practiced for years to convey. His hands moved confidently across the keys, sometimes fast and energetic, sometimes slow and reflective. The crowd responded instinctively, some tapping their feet, others closing their eyes, all feeling the energy and passion in the performance. As the melody progressed, more and more people began filming, sharing the experience in real time on social media. The comments were immediate. Messages of amazement, inspiration, and encouragement poured in. Strangers from distant cities and even different countries were now witnessing his talent through screens, captivated by what they saw and heard. The music was no longer confined to the plaza. It was reaching far beyond, touching hearts and creating connections with people who would never meet him in person. The security guard who had approached him on the first day was present again, this time standing quietly to the side. His demeanor had changed from stern authority to quiet respect. It was clear that he had witnessed something special, something that went beyond rules and regulations. Even he could not ignore the impact of the young man's talent. People in the crowd noticed the guard's presence and smiled quietly, recognizing that this story had grown from a small moment of challenge into something remarkable. As the performance continued, the young man experimented with new pieces and improvisations. He blended familiar melodies with original sequences, creating a dynamic and emotionally rich experience. The audience reacted instantly, leaning in, clapping along, and even whispering to each other about the beauty of what they were witnessing. The music felt alive, growing and shifting with each passing moment, as if the piano itself were breathing. The energy of the crowd was contagious. Strangers shared smiles and laughter, children giggled with delight, and older listeners nodded in appreciation. The young man noticed the subtle ways the music affected people, the tapping of feet, the swaying of bodies, the quiet awe on faces. Every note was not just heard. It was felt, creating a shared experience that connected the audience in a way few things could. As the sun began to rise higher in the sky, the plaza was filled with a sense of anticipation. People were eager to see what would come next, drawn in by the combination of skill, emotion, and spontaneity. The young man responded to this energy, allowing himself to explore more daring melodies and faster, more intricate passages. The crowd watched in amazement, witnessing someone completely in tune with their instrument, expressing themselves fully without hesitation. The music soon shifted into a slower, more reflective section. The young man allowed the notes to linger, creating a moment of quiet contemplation for everyone listening. People closed their eyes, absorbing the beauty of the sound and feeling the emotion behind each chord. It was a shared moment of introspection, a pause from the world around them, where the music connected everyone on a deeper level. As he reached the climax of the performance, the young man's confidence and skill were fully evident. The notes soared, echoing across the plaza, and the audience responded with quiet gasps of admiration. The music had grown from simple melodies to a complex, emotionally rich story that everyone could feel. It was clear that his talent was extraordinary, a rare combination of skill, creativity, and emotional expression. When the final notes faded, there was a brief silence, as if the plaza itself was holding its breath. Then, the applause began, growing louder and louder, filling the space with cheers and clapping. People who had never met each other before exchanged smiles and words of praise. The young man bowed, acknowledging the audience's admiration, but remained humble, focused more on sharing his music than on receiving recognition. After the performance, people approached him, asking questions, complimenting his skill, and expressing how inspired they felt. He spoke softly about his love for music and the joy of sharing it with others, emphasizing that playing was about connection rather than fame. His words, like his music, were sincere and heartfelt, leaving a lasting impression on those who listened. Throughout the day, more and more people arrived, some who had heard about the viral videos online and others who had been drawn by the energy of the crowd. The young man played multiple pieces, each one unique, each one touching hearts in different ways. The plaza had become more than a public space. It was a stage for creativity, inspiration, and human connection. Strangers formed bonds through the shared experience, all brought together by the music. By evening, the young man had performed for hours, yet his energy and passion remained strong. The crowd slowly dispersed, carrying with them memories, videos, and stories to share. People talked about the performance long after leaving, inspired by the dedication and talent they had witnessed. Even the security guard, who had initially tried to stop him, remained behind, silently acknowledging the impact of the young man's music. As he packed up his bag and prepared to leave, the young man felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The music had reached hearts, created connections, and inspired countless people, both in the plaza and around the world through online sharing. He knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to grow, reach more people, and bring joy and inspiration in ways he could not yet imagine. The plaza had been transformed, not by grand gestures or expensive performances, but by the simple, powerful act of one person sharing his passion and talent. He walked away with a quiet sense of pride, knowing that the music he played would continue to echo in the hearts of those who had listened. As the days passed, the young man's performances became more than just local events. They began to attract attention from people all over the city. News outlets and bloggers had picked up the story, sharing clips of his piano playing online. Social media was buzzing with admiration, with people sharing and commenting on how incredible it was that someone so talented could appear so unexpectedly in a public plaza. The young man, however, remained grounded. He played not for fame but for the love of music and the joy it brought to others. Each day, more people arrived, drawn by the promise of hearing him perform. Some had traveled from other neighborhoods, some had watched the viral videos online, and some had been inspired to come simply to experience the music for themselves. The plaza had transformed from an ordinary public space into a gathering place for people seeking beauty, connection, and inspiration. Strangers who had never met shared smiles, laughter, and whispered admiration, all connected by the music. The young man felt the growing energy from the crowd as he approached the piano each day. With each performance, he allowed himself to explore new melodies, blending classical techniques with improvisation and emotion. His fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, and the music became a story in itself, communicating feelings that words could not capture. People listened with rapt attention, absorbed in the performance and moved by the emotion behind each note. Even the security guards, who had initially tried to stop him, became more supportive over time. They had witnessed firsthand the joy and inspiration his music brought to the public. Some smiled as he played, while others simply observed quietly, understanding that this young man's talent had created something extraordinary. The music had softened the tension that had once existed, turning skepticism into admiration. The young man noticed how different people responded to his music. Children often clapped along or bounced lightly in rhythm, their faces full of wonder. Adults, on the other hand, seemed to feel the deeper layers of emotion, reflecting on memories or personal experiences triggered by the melodies. Friends and strangers alike exchanged glances, sharing the unspoken understanding that something rare and beautiful was happening. The plaza had become a space where people could feel connected, even if only for a few moments. He also began to interact more with the audience between pieces. He spoke softly about his love for music, the hours of practice it took to develop his skill, and how music had always been a way for him to express what he could not say in words. His humility and sincerity touched people deeply, making them feel as though they were part of a personal experience rather than just spectators. It was this connection, more than the technical skill, that left a lasting impression. One day, a small group of professional musicians happened to be in the plaza, drawn by the growing buzz online. They stopped to listen, and as they watched, they became visibly impressed by the young man's mastery of the piano. After the performance, they approached him with admiration and curiosity, asking questions about his training and style. The young man, ever humble, explained that he had learned through dedication, practice, and a love for music rather than formal instruction. His story inspired them as much as his performance had. The viral attention continued to grow. Videos of his performances were shared internationally, with viewers from different countries commenting on his talent and emotional expression. He received messages of encouragement and admiration from people he would never meet in person. The young man was careful to stay focused on the essence of what he was doing, sharing music and connecting with people. Fame was not his goal. The goal was the shared human experience that music could create. Over time, he was invited to perform at special events, festivals, and community gatherings. His reputation as a talented and passionate pianist grew, and opportunities began to appear that he had never imagined. Yet, even with these invitations, he continued to perform in the plaza regularly. The public performances remained special to him because they allowed him to reach people directly, to see their reactions, and to feel the immediate connection that was impossible to replicate on a formal stage. As his music reached more people, he began to notice a change in how society viewed public performance and creativity. Passers-by were more attentive, respectful, and appreciative of artistic expression in communal spaces. Children and teenagers were inspired to try their own instruments or pursue creative hobbies. Parents encouraged their kids to explore music, art, and performance. The young man's presence and dedication had a subtle yet profound impact on the community, showing that one person's talent could influence and uplift many. Every performance became a journey. He started experimenting with different genres, blending classical with modern, soft melodies with powerful crescendos. Each day he played, he discovered something new in the music, and the audience discovered something new in him. People began to recognize him as a source of inspiration, someone who reminded them of the power of passion, perseverance, and creativity. Even as his recognition grew, he never lost sight of the essence of what he was doing. He maintained humility and focused on connection rather than applause. He remembered the first day, when security had tried to stop him, and he smiled at how far the journey had come. What had started as a challenge became a turning point not only for him but for everyone who had witnessed his music. His story was a testament to perseverance, courage, and the simple joy of sharing one's passion. By the end of the week, the plaza had become a hub of energy and inspiration. People came from afar to experience the music, and local residents eagerly anticipated each performance. The young man had not only shared his talent but had created a sense of community, a space where people could gather, feel, and be inspired. The impact of his music extended beyond the immediate moment, leaving memories that people would carry with them for a lifetime. As he packed up his bag at the end of each day, he felt a quiet pride. Not pride in recognition or viral fame, but in the knowledge that his music had touched hearts, inspired strangers, and created a positive ripple in the world. The plaza had become a stage for human connection, and he had been the catalyst. Music, he realized, was more than notes on a page. It was a language that could unite people, break down barriers, and remind everyone of the beauty and potential in the world around them. Through every performance, the young man remained true to himself, focused on sharing joy, emotion, and inspiration. The journey that began with a simple act of courage, playing despite opposition, had grown into something remarkable. It was a story of talent, resilience, and the power of music to create lasting impact. And as he looked out over the crowd each day, he knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to touch lives, both in the plaza and far beyond. The young man returned to the plaza one final time in the series of performances that had captured the attention of the city. The air was filled with anticipation, a mix of excitement and calm curiosity. People from nearby neighborhoods, and even some who had traveled from further away, were gathering in the space, ready to witness the music that had already touched so many hearts. The plaza seemed different now, almost alive, as if it had been waiting for this moment to happen again. He approached the piano, his small bag slung over one shoulder, carrying only the essentials he needed for the day. The instrument itself seemed familiar now, each key a friend he had come to know intimately. He ran his fingers lightly over the surface, feeling the smoothness and imagining the melodies he would create. The crowd hushed as he began to play, the first notes floating gently into the morning air, soft and inviting. The music was immediately engaging, more expressive than ever. Each note was deliberate yet effortless, conveying emotion that resonated deeply with everyone present. Children tilted their heads in wonder, some moving closer to see the young man's hands dance across the keys. Adults stood still, mesmerized, sharing glances that conveyed admiration and awe. Strangers whispered quietly to each other about how amazing it was that someone could perform with such skill and heart in a public space. He allowed himself to become fully immersed in the music. His hands moved confidently, transitioning smoothly from soft, reflective melodies to stronger, more energetic passages. The performance was not just about notes or rhythm. It was about telling a story, one that could be felt rather than simply heard. The crowd, already captivated, felt the emotional depth in every chord. There was a shared understanding, a quiet connection among everyone who had gathered. People began filming and sharing the performance online, extending its reach far beyond the plaza. Messages of admiration, inspiration, and encouragement poured in from viewers across the city and even from other countries. The young man's music was reaching hearts he might never meet, touching lives in ways that went beyond what he could imagine. Yet, he remained focused, playing not for recognition, but for the simple joy of sharing his passion. Even the security guards, who had once tried to stop him, now watched respectfully from the side. Their expressions had softened, replaced by appreciation and quiet pride. The transformation was subtle but meaningful. The young man had turned initial opposition into acknowledgement of his talent and perseverance. It was a reminder that art and passion could overcome doubt, fear, and skepticism. As the performance continued, the young man experimented with new variations, blending classical techniques with improvisation and modern rhythms. Each piece had its own personality, evoking different emotions in the audience. Some listened with quiet reflection, others nodded in time with the rhythm, and some smiled or laughed quietly at the playful sections. The plaza became a shared space of discovery and inspiration, a temporary community united by music. Throughout the day, the young man noticed how different people responded uniquely to the performance. Children clapped or bounced lightly in rhythm, inspired by the playful energy of certain melodies. Adults often closed their eyes, feeling memories or emotions stirred by the music. Friends and strangers exchanged glances, smiling at the shared experience, realizing that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. It was a connection that transcended age, background, and language. He also engaged briefly with the crowd between pieces, speaking softly about the importance of pursuing passion, practicing patience, and embracing creativity. He emphasized that music was a universal language capable of connecting people and touching hearts. His humility and sincerity resonated as much as the performance itself, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The day's performance included both familiar melodies and new compositions he had created. Each piece was designed to evoke emotion, from gentle, reflective tunes to more vibrant and energetic sequences. The transitions between them were seamless, and the audience responded intuitively, leaning in, smiling, and at times holding their breath in awe. The music told a story that was both personal and shared, a narrative that brought strangers together in a moment of communal wonder. By mid-afternoon, the plaza was filled with people who had heard about the young man through viral videos, word of mouth, or simply curiosity. The energy was electric yet calm, a testament to the power of music to transform ordinary spaces into extraordinary experiences. People had come to witness something rare, and they were rewarded with a performance that touched hearts and inspired minds. The young man allowed the music to flow freely, letting improvisation guide the melodies at times. Each note seemed to resonate with the crowd in a different way, creating a dynamic interaction between performer and audience. Some moved to the rhythm, some closed their eyes to feel the music more deeply, and some simply stood in awe, amazed by the skill and emotion on display. It was clear that the performance was not just entertainment. It was a human experience, shared and felt by all. As the sun began to lower, casting golden light across the plaza, he moved into the final section of the performance. The music became more powerful, more expressive, with soaring chords and intricate passages. The crowd responded with quiet gasps, smiles, and applause, deeply engaged in every moment. The energy in the plaza reached its peak, and it was clear that this was a moment no one would forget. When the final notes lingered and faded into silence, the crowd remained still for a heartbeat, savoring the end of the performance. Then, as if on cue, applause erupted. Cheers, clapping, and whistles filled the plaza. People who had never met each other before exchanged smiles, high fives, and whispered words of admiration. The young man bowed, acknowledging the appreciation, though his humility remained evident. The joy of sharing music and connecting with others was the reward he sought. After the performance, people approached him with kind words, questions, and expressions of gratitude. They spoke about how inspired they felt, how the music had lifted their spirits, and how it had reminded them of the beauty in everyday life. He responded with warmth, encouraging others to pursue their passions and find joy in creative expression. His message, like his music, was heartfelt and sincere. As the plaza emptied and the day came to a close, the young man packed up his bag, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. What began as a simple act of courage, playing despite opposition, had transformed into something extraordinary. He had connected with thousands of people, inspired strangers, and reminded everyone present of the power of talent, perseverance, and passion. The plaza, once ordinary, had become a space of memory, inspiration, and shared human experience. He walked away from the piano with a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that his music had left a lasting impact. People would remember the performances, share the videos, and carry the feelings they experienced into their lives. The story of his determination and talent would continue to inspire others to follow their passions, overcome challenges, and share their gifts with the world. The young man realized that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to touch hearts far beyond the plaza, leaving a legacy of hope, courage, and beauty that would resonate for years to come. The young man returned to the plaza one final time in the series of performances that had captured the attention of the city. The air was filled with anticipation, a mix of excitement and calm curiosity. People from nearby neighborhoods, and even some who had traveled from further away, were gathering in the space, ready to witness the music that had already touched so many hearts. The plaza seemed different now, almost alive, as if it had been waiting for this moment to happen again. He approached the piano, his small bag slung over one shoulder, carrying only the essentials he needed for the day. The instrument itself seemed familiar now, each key a friend he had come to know intimately. He ran his fingers lightly over the surface, feeling the smoothness and imagining the melodies he would create. The crowd hushed as he began to play, the first notes floating gently into the morning air, soft and inviting. The music was immediately engaging, more expressive than ever. Each note was deliberate yet effortless, conveying emotion that resonated deeply with everyone present. Children tilted their heads in wonder, some moving closer to see the young man's hands dance across the keys. Adults stood still, mesmerized, sharing glances that conveyed admiration and awe. Strangers whispered quietly to each other about how amazing it was that someone could perform with such skill and heart in a public space. He allowed himself to become fully immersed in the music. His hands moved confidently, transitioning smoothly from soft, reflective melodies to stronger, more energetic passages. The performance was not just about notes or rhythm. It was about telling a story, one that could be felt rather than simply heard. The crowd, already captivated, felt the emotional depth in every chord. There was a shared understanding, a quiet connection among everyone who had gathered. People began filming and sharing the performance online, extending its reach far beyond the plaza. Messages of admiration, inspiration, and encouragement poured in from viewers across the city and even from other countries. The young man's music was reaching hearts he might never meet, touching lives in ways that went beyond what he could imagine. Yet, he remained focused, playing not for recognition, but for the simple joy of sharing his passion. Even the security guards, who had once tried to stop him, now watched respectfully from the side. Their expressions had softened, replaced by appreciation and quiet pride. The transformation was subtle but meaningful. The young man had turned initial opposition into acknowledgement of his talent and perseverance. It was a reminder that art and passion could overcome doubt, fear, and skepticism. As the performance continued, the young man experimented with new variations, blending classical techniques with improvisation and modern rhythms. Each piece had its own personality, evoking different emotions in the audience. Some listened with quiet reflection, others nodded in time with the rhythm, and some smiled or laughed quietly at the playful sections. The plaza became a shared space of discovery and inspiration, a temporary community united by music. Throughout the day, the young man noticed how different people responded uniquely to the performance. Children clapped or bounced lightly in rhythm, inspired by the playful energy of certain melodies. Adults often closed their eyes, feeling memories or emotions stirred by the music. Friends and strangers exchanged glances, smiling at the shared experience, realizing that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. It was a connection that transcended age, background, and language. He also engaged briefly with the crowd between pieces, speaking softly about the importance of pursuing passion, practicing patience, and embracing creativity. He emphasized that music was a universal language capable of connecting people and touching hearts. His humility and sincerity resonated as much as the performance itself, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The day's performance included both familiar melodies and new compositions he had created. Each piece was designed to evoke emotion, from gentle, reflective tunes to more vibrant and energetic sequences. The transitions between them were seamless, and the audience responded intuitively, leaning in, smiling, and at times holding their breath in awe. The music told a story that was both personal and shared, a narrative that brought strangers together in a moment of communal wonder. By mid-afternoon, the plaza was filled with people who had heard about the young man through viral videos, word of mouth, or simply curiosity. The energy was electric yet calm, a testament to the power of music to transform ordinary spaces into extraordinary experiences. People had come to witness something rare, and they were rewarded with a performance that touched hearts and inspired minds. The young man allowed the music to flow freely, letting improvisation guide the melodies at times. Each note seemed to resonate with the crowd in a different way, creating a dynamic interaction between performer and audience. Some moved to the rhythm, some closed their eyes to feel the music more deeply, and some simply stood in awe, amazed by the skill and emotion on display. It was clear that the performance was not just entertainment. It was a human experience, shared and felt by all. As the sun began to lower, casting golden light across the plaza, he moved into the final section of the performance. The music became more powerful, more expressive, with soaring chords and intricate passages. The crowd responded with quiet gasps, smiles, and applause, deeply engaged in every moment. The energy in the plaza reached its peak, and it was clear that this was a moment no one would forget. When the final notes lingered and faded into silence, the crowd remained still for a heartbeat, savoring the end of the performance. Then, As if on cue, applause erupted, cheers, clapping, and whistles filled the plaza. People who had never met each other before exchanged smiles, high fives, and whispered words of admiration. The young man bowed, acknowledging the appreciation, though his humility remained evident. The joy of sharing music and connecting with others was the reward he sought. After the performance, people approached him with kind words, questions, and expressions of gratitude. They spoke about how inspired they felt, how the music had lifted their spirits, and how it had reminded them of the beauty in everyday life. He responded with warmth, encouraging others to pursue their passions and find joy in creative expression. His message, like his music, was heartfelt and sincere. As the plaza emptied and the day came to a close, the young man packed up his bag, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. What began as a simple act of courage, playing despite opposition, had transformed into something extraordinary. He had connected with thousands of people, inspired strangers, and reminded everyone present of the power of talent, perseverance, and passion. The plaza, once ordinary, had become a space of memory, inspiration, and shared human experience. He walked away from the piano with a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that his music had left a lasting impact. People would remember the performances, share the videos, and carry the feelings they experienced into their lives. The story of his determination and talent would continue to inspire others to follow their passions, overcome challenges, and share their gifts with the world. The young man realized that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to touch hearts far beyond the plaza, leaving a legacy of hope, courage, and beauty that would resonate for years to come.